Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball! Well, hello, everybody. Hello, great listening audience. This is Don Sullivan, and we're going to start the Don Sullivan Show, and you're going to have a lot of very interesting conversation, and I will talk to you about who I am, but not quite yet. We're going to talk about the show first, and I'm going to introduce you to my sidekick and partner here, Mr. Jersey Steve. Hi, Steve. How are you today?
Doing good. January 3rd. It's a beautiful day outside here in New Jersey.
I'm glad you mentioned the fact that it's the beginning of January and January 3rd, because we are starting this podcast. This is episode 0, not a pilot. This is going to be a live podcast. It's going to be out there. It's going to be a podcast that's very different than anything you've ever seen before. We're going to do this from a perspective of a number of different scientific focuses: science, technology, and computing. We are going to have episode after episode that is not necessarily related to the previous one and is very distinct in the various different categories to cover everything having to do with science that your average teenager should understand in the United States. And the reason we're going to do it that way is that we both have a deep philosophy and a deep belief that, for the most part, the American education system over the last 75 years has failed America. Has failed America in a number of different perspectives. And we're going to try to stay away from anything that's really political. But obviously, there's going to be slants and various different inferences that the listener can garner from all of our conversation. But I am going to stay with a number of different philosophies, which I will be very clear about in this episode 0 here. But to a large extent, what we really want to focus on, and we will be very successful with, is science, technology, and computing, and discussions around it with the best guests in the world that we are going to be inviting on this podcast to talk about science, technology, and computing that a high school individual, a student, could easily absorb. I taught in high school in a different lifetime 40 years ago. I understand very, very well exactly what your average intelligent American high school student can understand. Most of what's done in Silicon Valley, Stephen and I both spent a lot of time working in various different companies in Silicon Valley. I'm a 30-year veteran. Steve lives in New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey, but I live in Colorado and worked in Palo Alto for about 30 years. And I understand the technology and the breadth of the technology, and I believe that 75 to 90% of it can be absorbed and understood and actually managed by your average teenager. And so along with that computing aspect, everything else that can possibly fall under the general umbrella of science is going to be the province of the Don Sullivan Show. We want and we believe in transparency, as we said in our original bumper music and the initial narrative. We believe in transparency. We believe that everyone should understand a great majority of these basic scientific concepts. So we are going to cover everything from the present state of pharmacology, the present state of food, with all deference to the future Health and Human Services Secretary, Bobby Kennedy, and how he plans on reconstructing the entire food system of the United States. Everything having to do with the world's climate and the controversies that are surrounding that. Unlike virtually everything else in the media, and following Elon Musk's great tweet from the end of the election, when he said, "You are the media now, we are the media now," we are seeing dozens and hundreds of podcasts popping up everywhere because that is the media. We will be looking at every possible different category and of science, technology, computing that we can and the guests that go along with those various different subjects that we can get on this show and have very transparent and intense and thoughtful conversations with, so that the general public, our listeners, can understand exactly what that particular area of science is. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Each show is going to be about 40 minutes long. And like I said, we're going to just have a great time doing it all. And I hope you listen. What else you got to say, Steve?
Sure. Well, first, I appreciate you keeping it at a high school level for me. But I agree 100%.
Teenage level.
Teenage level.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot going on right now that we could dive into, as far as current events. We had terrorist attacks recently, New Orleans, as well as Las Vegas with the Cybertruck
that might be
exploding.
Under the psychology heading of the science, technology, and computing.
These guys went to Fort Liberty, which I think used to be called Fort Bragg. But
yes, by anybody who went there, it's still called Fort Bragg. But again, I'm staying away from the politics.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, and so what's going on there at Fort Liberty? The very fact that the second assassination attempt on former president, future president Donald Trump, that guy spent some time, or was a frequent visitor, I guess, to Fort Liberty as well. So it's kind of interesting. But again, those are under the heading of psychology, what actually causes people to take these kind of actions. And psychology is a branch of science that we will be discussing in many episodes as we go along over the next number of years on the Don Sullivan Show.
Yeah, I read that they were both deployed in Afghanistan in 2009. And the whole, why did they do it? What were the motives? Were they radicalized by someone? How do you end up that way?
We're going to get into enormous discussions about all of that. How have they possibly been radicalized? Was it influence? Was it different drugs they were taking? Is that an influential factor? Is there psychological damage that they suffered that we have never really experienced in previous wars? Because quite honestly, most people who were that injured didn't come home. They just died.
Yeah, that's true.
In the last 25 years, we have experienced an enormous influx of very, very damaged psychologically and physical soldiers that have come back from these various different theaters of adventure. Every time that you watch a Wounded Warriors or Tunnel to Towers commercial, you see one or two more people that have enormous damage to their life in many, many different ways. And those are the kind of subjects we are going to discuss from a scientific perspective. Again, I'm not trying to push a particular political agenda here. Everybody has one. Everybody has their own particular positions on every issue that they think of. We're not doing that. Our intention here is to talk about the science, and to have guests that are experts on the science. So, for example, when we discuss the world's climate, the weather, and all aspects of the history of the world's climate, we're going to have people on that we're going to get intense with, people who are very much of the position that there really isn't any more discussion to be had in regards to climate change, that this is a settled subject, as they say. Now, my opinion on science is there's no such thing as a settled subject. But we're also going to have people from the other end, and that's not something that you see in the media at all, ever. For the most part, most of the media, even the media that's supposedly on the right side of the political spectrum, for the most part, just simply accepts the government, the World Economic Forum, and the WHO, and whatever other supposedly authoritative bodies are giving us the settled information that the world is, from a climatological perspective, a meteorological perspective, heading in one direction. We're going to have a lot of people on. And to be honest, you see a lot of them on Twitter. You don't necessarily see a lot of them on various different forms of mainstream media. And yes, I still will refer to Twitter. Elon might not be happy eventually, but that's how we know it. And it is, of course, X and X everything. And we will talk about all of those different things. And we're going to mention Elon Musk a lot because there's all kinds of cool stuff scientifically that's going on. We're going to talk about everything from quantum computing with serious guests. And this, of course, is our background in the whole world of computing in Silicon Valley to at some point, I'm going to ask Casey and Callie Means to get on so we can talk about semaglutides and the various different weight loss drugs. Again, I'm going to be very, very transparent about myself and Steve. I myself am diabetic. I climb a lot of mountains and I run around Colorado a lot and I go run around the world. And one of the things I'm going to do is we're going to do extemporaneous interviews of people who are all over the place in the world. I will have people on from the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I will have people on who are sitting in Yankee Stadium in the seventh inning, and we will talk about some aspect that is scientifically based along those lines. So this is going to be a very, very broad, very transparent, very intense set of discussions, which one of the fun things about it is from episode to episode, from week to week, you, the listener, aren't necessarily going to know what we're going to talk about. There will be threads, but we're not going to have a series of 5 or 6 episodes that follow the same actual subject. We'll refer back to the various different episodes that are relevant, but we might go from one episode to talk about why so many 18-year-old pitchers in baseball need elbow surgeries. And then the next week, we'll have a discussion on some other new type of vaccine that is out there that supposedly is going to save us from the bird flu or something. I'm just giving you some examples.
Do they have a bird flu?
Well,
there's plenty to talk about there.
That.
They have a bird flu. Well, no, I know they mentioned that I think somebody got it and there were mutations they were concerned about or something like that.
Yes, it's an H5 strain, right? Yeah. H5 strain. And that's completely different than the flus that we know about. It's completely different and likely, I don't even know. But this is why we need to have guests on that really know. I don't even know if the H5 strain is included in the flu vaccine that we're supposed to take every 6 months. Oh, excuse me, every year. They have you take it every year, but they have a new one every 6 months. So I don't understand that particular regiment either. But these are the kind of things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, they've got to update them. And I think it's I don't want to call it a guessing game, but I think they try and predict what strains will be most prevalent. And then,
yeah, but why is it why do they have a new one every 6 months, but they only tell you to take it every year? And me, myself, I only want to take it every other couple of years because I think there is some relevance to the notion of vaccine resistance if you take too many of them. And heck, I'm 62 years old. How many have I taken over my lifetime? Too many, probably.
Have they done any studies on that? Or
I doubt it. And of course, big pharma in general, their whole purpose is to become a multi-trillion-dollar industry, the biggest industry in the world, the biggest industry in the country, even bigger than the Defense Department now in terms of government budget, is the food industry or is the health industry. And we should probably, I think some of our guests will agree with us that to a large extent, the food industry is sort of a subset of the health industry, or the Venn diagram. I'll try not to use too many of those analogies. Overlap significantly there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to me is, if you look at the major ailments in this country, a lot of them tend to be kind of diet or lifestyle related, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera. And on the one hand, you have a big food industry that pushes junk. It's not the healthiest. So they're making money selling that, and then a lot of pharmaceutical companies and our healthcare system is making money, on the treatment. So it's
we know that in the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller basically created the pharmaceutical industry as it exists right now. He subsidized Johns Hopkins as well as a number of other major medical schools and created the methodology by which medicines are applied to silos of various different diseases, as opposed to, and in fact, they were very explicitly opposed to the holistic treatment of any individual. In fact, that's why we have so many specialties and subspecialties for different types of doctors. And then, of course, you have the same thing that has occurred with pharmaceuticals. And it is extremely difficult to understand how various different pharmaceuticals, in fact, as you just mentioned, Steve, there's very little data and very little understanding of my situation, that when I'm taking 7 or 8 different drugs, pharmaceuticals that are incredibly expensive for various different things that I have problems with. I've had a heart attack and I have diabetes and other issues. I have particular issues with persistent migraines. So when you take all these drugs, it is very difficult to understand how they actually are counterindicated, meaning how they are affect each other, and whether or not they cause various different combinations of issues that aren't revealed for decades, if not entire lifetimes. So this is, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, obviously. I've just spent enough time at Holiday Inn Expresses to sort of reading to understand a little bit on a very a dangerous level. And I know enough to actually have a lot of discussions with a lot of experts that we're going to have on this show. And so do you. And we're going to have fun with it, but we're also going to be extremely, as I said, transparent and very direct in regards to all of the information that we get. There will be, some intensity involved in all of this.
Well, I think scientific debate is healthy.
We don't do that in this country. We don't. We just assume that
not at a high
experts,
level,
whatever that means. One of the things I will tell you is that the word expert to me lost a lot of credibility sometime around March of 2020. I stopped trusting people who referred to themselves as experts.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, it's what expert. And then, I think right now we're at a time where more people than ever are kind of calling into question or kind of thinking more critically about what the experts say, as far as traditional appeals to authority, whether it's the legacy media.
Understanding of basic science. And the general American public doesn't have that.
No.
Anything that you don't see on a TV show or has been force-fed to you by mainstream or cable news, you don't understand. It just utterly amazes me at this point how much information that you get that is later, and by later I mean sometimes that afternoon, changed, particularly when it's a catastrophic event, because they are so desperate to be the first entity to a particular story. Yeah, and the same thing is true from a long-term perspective.
That has a lasting impact on the narrative too.
It does.
When they get in early and make mistakes, they hang around. Narratives, that they form early. So yeah, no, absolutely.
So we're going to all do things, and I know we are digressing back and forth here, but that's because I just want to have a general conversation right now. This is episode 0 about what this overall podcast is going to be like. And there is going to be a bit of an ADD type of mentality to it. We are going to have discussions that are very, very deep and then also very topical. And we're going to move back and forth to wherever that particular subject goes. I'm going to have a narrative for each of these. Steve has got tremendous background to be able to keep me honest and to keep me somewhat on track. That's really hard to do. And Those of you who have worked with me in Silicon Valley for the last 30 years know that pretty well.
Well, sometimes it's fun to go off road, Don. I'm not going to knock it all the time.
I have 4-wheel drive though.
Yeah, that's true.
So you better not turn over, because then you might be stuck somewhere. So our background, again, just to sort of get back a little bit on track. Speaking of that subject, is in computing. I mean, just to give you, and I'm not going to really harp in any way on our specific backgrounds, but I spent 7 years at Oracle, 14 years at VMware. I spent a lot of time teaching. I'm, by my very nature, a coach. That's how I think. I'm an athlete. Or not anymore, I suppose. I'm 62 years old and I'm pretty beaten up, but I still do a lot. I was a distance runner of some note way back in the day in the 80s. And so all of these subjects, as they fit into a scientific discussion, there are various different paradigms of those different subjects are all going to be fodder for the Don Sullivan Show. And I think, again, we're going to have a lot of fun. Now, most people seeing this are going to believe, and it totally makes sense, that we should stay in our lanes and we should stay, for the most part, in the computing world. And, the most significant subject that exists right now in the computing world is artificial intelligence. And wait till you hear when we actually have those subjects. I'm going to take the position that artificial intelligence doesn't even really exist, that it's a branding, that it's a buzzword at best. And I'm going to have some experts on here who we've worked with for a while, and we're going to talk about the state of artificial intelligence and the reality of the machine learning behind it and where it all came from. I'm going to quote people like former VMware and Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, who always referred to as artificial intelligence as a 50-year overnight success story, and why he says that, and why he's right and why he's wrong. We're going to have all these discussions.
Don, I just checked on ChatGPT, and they say you're wrong. They say it does exist.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to argue with OpenAI and Sam. Got a bunch of friends who at OpenAI, wonderful place, but I'm going to take this position, and I'm going to take that position hard. And we're going to argue with some serious AI experts as to why artificial intelligence isn't real. And just to give you a sneak preview on that, my answer is going to be, tell me when you get to real neural networks, not model neural networks. Call me when you actually get to what I call artificial intuition as opposed to artificial intelligence. But we'll get back to that in those appropriate episodes. What do you think, Steve?
Now, artificial intuition, I'm actually going to press you on this.
Oh,
how would you define artificial intuition?
Real thinking, creativity. Creativity combined with brilliance leads to genius. What we have right now in artificial intelligence is actually really machine learning and the reason it works is that the processors are so unfathomably powerful, certainly even as compared to 5 years ago, with enormous amounts of data, stockpiles, data lakes, and however else you want to refer to the enormous amounts of data that can be fed into these tremendous processors that go through algorithms, which are really nothing more than arithmetic interpolations and extrapolations that come up with a probabilistic solution or a probabilistic answer and can be done in nanoseconds as opposed to anything else that we have seen in the past. So the answers that you will get out of any of, whether it's Grok or ChatGPT or something else, are very good. I've used a lot of them, and they're really interesting in terms of their accuracy. But they're not always accurate, and it's not really thinking. A neural network in an animal, or certainly a human brain, actually works primarily from an emotional perspective. All memory is emotional. A synapse is created every time there's an emotional reaction. Both of us in this particular episode have probably had millions that have been created just from the various different elements of discussion that we've had. And it's not just a lattice. It's not just a matrix that allows for various different channels to be taken to come up with an iterative solution or an iterative answer that looks like it's something that could be done by a human much, much faster. That's why it's not really intelligence, it's iteration. So that's my position. Steve, you got me to sort of get way too far into this area
No, I
before
like.
our artificial intelligence and
Sometimes we have to
machine
go into the
learning
weeds.
episodes. Yes.
No, so you think the math's behind?
Well, really interesting. Most of the history of humanity, mathematics has been ahead in terms of both algorithmic and just the pure math of technology by about 100 years. Obviously, Newton and Leibniz had to discover calculus, particularly Newton, to actually write the Principia and to lay out Newton's laws of motion. The math in that case needed to catch up to the actual physics involved. But most of human history, you've seen, you can go to math departments in every university, and they are working on real analysis and complex theories that have nothing to do with reality. In this case, the technology, I think, is way beyond the actual mathematics. So we just don't have the real algorithms, and we do not have the mathematical understanding of how actual intelligence, how neural networks will really work or do really work to actually call this legitimately artificial intelligence. And that's why I refer to it as a buzzword. I mean, we all know that 50 years ago, and this is where Pat's point was, there was a move towards artificial intelligence with a language that was created specifically for it. And I'm going to have an expert in Lisp, that is the LISP, was the language that was used in the 60s. I'm going to have an expert who will talk about Lisp and where the notions and the term artificial intelligence really came from in the 50s and 60s. So we'll have an episode on that sometime in the next few months, or even maybe sooner than that. That'll be really kind of interesting. And I do assure you all that when we have experts on, when we are, Stephen and I are actually interviewing those experts, we will stick to that particular subject, and we'll talk to them for about 40 minutes. It won't go beyond that. But we will not digress to the point of looking
not
like
too much. There may be some talk of baseball
cats like we do right now. Well, yes, Stephen, that's a really important point. My life has obviously, like I said before, I'm a coach. That's the way I think. I never really was a geek. I just played one on TV, so to speak, for 30 years in Silicon Valley. But my whole soul, everything that comprises the way I think, can be summarized in baseball. I really do truly believe that inside of American baseball, that you can pretty much understand everything that there is to understand about life. There's more wisdom in baseball than there is in any other single concept, entity, art form. Baseball is an art form. There are really just a few art forms that are native to America: jazz, the Broadway musical, the Western movie maybe, and certainly baseball. Baseball, like all sports, is an athletic form of art. So yes, we're going to have a lot of. I spend a lot of time with baseball analogies and metaphors, and there will be a lot of you out there who will constantly roll your eyes, and there are a lot of people who know me who are rolling their eyes right now. In fact, I'm looking at Steve, and he's rolling his eyes right now. But you're going to hear a lot of that, because it's not that I can't help myself. It's that that's the way I think, and I just can't imagine a better way to understand the universe, or at least our human experience in the world, than through American baseball. Every baseball game, anywhere, at any place, at any time, on any level, is a celebration of American culture. And that's, to me, one of the more important aspects of how we will deliver the Don Sullivan Show. All right, well, Stephen, I think we're at a point right now where we can kind of wrap up episode 0. And I hope we have piqued the interest of a rather large group of folks out there who know both of us, have seen me. I've probably spoken to a couple of 100,000 people in various different forums over the last 30 years or so, but we're going to speak to you all like this from here on out in a much broader capacity about a much broader set of subjects that are all scientifically based. Now, I could apologize to you all because we were so incredibly scattered today. And I could tell you that our absolute intention is to be much, much more focused in all of the different episodes that we do. There will be a particular subject in regards to an episode. For example, the next 2 episodes that we're going to do are going to be on commercial drones and the incredible power of the present networks that exist, and specifically the networking chips. And we're going to have serious experts on. So again, I could promise you that there's the subjects that we breach and the conversation that we have will not be nearly as scattered as we have had today.
Yeah, it's January 3rd.
I would be lying too, because I don't really know. I don't know how this is going to actually unfold. This is going to be very genuine and very open. And the whole point of this is the whole nature of the Don Sullivan Show is to impart general teenage level scientific understanding to everyone who listens, hopefully everyone in the United States and in Western civilization that wants to and needs to understand basic scientific information from all different perspectives of the political spectrum. What do you think about that, Steve? We're going to get this done?
Oh, absolutely. And, today was just, it's like a sampler platter, when you go to Bennigan's, you've got the mozzarella sticks, you got the calamari.
I don't know if they're still around. We don't have Bennigan's.
No. Okay. That might be a little too East
TGI
Coast,
Fridays kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
TGI Fridays. Exactly. Yeah. You got the Southwestern sampler or whatever it is, but, we're just trying to let people wet their beaks, give them a taste, and then we get them hooked.
That's the point. And
just like they do on the streets. That's what we're looking to do here. We're giving you a taste.
We're not going to go beyond 40 minutes. Basically, the shorter podcast that I have produced over the years, I used to say to my partner at the time that I wanted to keep them between innings. And now that Rob Manfred has made the innings in baseball much, much shorter, that probably isn't realistic. But this particular episode, we'll say halftime in the or I guess I shouldn't use the word ball. I don't know if you're really allowed to use that. But you know what?
I think we'll have to cut that off.
Yeah, we'll probably have to cut that. The big game. Halftime in the big game in football. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's better. I think they sue you if you say that word.
Yeah, I think there's
a trademark thing or a copyright thing.
It doesn't matter that it's become a national holiday. You can't actually say the word. So halftime in the big game. That's how long.
And I'm hoping to see the Bills. I'm hoping to see the Bills there because the Giants.
You're gonna have to get past Patrick. You're gonna have to get Steve's a Giants fan. I'm actually going to be
rough season
in the Meadowlands this weekend to watch the last game of Mr. Aaron Rodgers, probably maybe the 500th touchdown pass. So both football teams in MetLife Stadium are pretty bad, and yeah, I can say that.
No, I think just about anyone can say that, but hey, there's always next year. All right, Don, if there's one thing you would like to let our listeners go away keeping in mind, if there's one key takeaway, what would it be?
The key takeaway is that we want you to listen, we want you to remember, and we want you to learn something every single episode in a variety of different manners and subjects that comprise the entire breadth of the scientific world on a level in which your average teenager can and should be able to absorb and understand. That is just simply not something that has been done in the American education system or in the media. And as Elon Musk said, we are the media now, and that's how we are going to run the Don Sullivan podcast from here on out. Thanks, Steve.